Peace and blessings, family. This is your brother, asarimhotep, with the Martin Delaney Center for Egyptology. And it is Kujichagulia, Monday, July the 10th, 2023. And we are going to have an in-depth discussion asking the question, does the word Kim or Kemet mean black bull, black cattle? All that and more when we return in just a moment. Peace and blessings, and we are back. I want to thank each and every one of you today for joining our conversation. And as always, I want to thank those of you who have joined us live and have made yourself known in the chat. So I want to say peace and blessings to Sister Mika and Sister Malkia Wamungu, and we have Franklin Amarte in the house, and Vayesa Nicolo Gula is in the house, and Learn Together with Obam is in the building, as well as Infinite Minds, and the initials DM. Thank you for joining us. Sister Gigi is in the building. Thank you. And now, I remember from one of the previous conversations, I believe that I'm saying this name wrong because I think he made a comment in the chat. So when I see this name, I automatically say Dash Arab as, kind of two words. And so is it more so pronounced Dash Arab? If so, let me know in the chat, but want to welcome you to the program again. Peace and blessings to you, and Brother Robert Rand is in the building. And joining us from Facebook, we have Jean Cedric Ngawa, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Want to say thank you for joining. And what does Robert Rand say? Shaka almost has been putting your name in his mouth, claims he wants to challenge you. That's funny. But and so, yes, alrighty. So I've been mispronouncing the name when I say Dash Arab, but it should be something closer to Dash Arab. And so thank you for correcting me, on that. And so again, welcome to the program. And so we asked the question at the beginning, does Kemet mean black cattle or black bull? And so Dash Arab says black, yes, but cattle, no. However, Learn Together with Obam says black, no, cattle, yes. And so we're going to definitely find out what that means today. And so Organized Chaos has made themselves known, and thank you for joining us. And Brother Jean is correcting me. He says Ngua. And so that's how you pronounce it. And so thank you for the correction. And Donnie C is in the building. And Musa Inskela, the South African names, the X is pronounced differently. And so I know I'm messing that up. So, help me with the pronunciation of your name as well so I can say it correctly. And Robert Rand says, Shaka Amos is publicly challenging your scholarship. He needs to get this work live. I'm always down. So I just got to see what the nature of his arguments are, and if we actually disagree. So we'll see in the near future. And then we got our brother Zoo 221. He changes his name each week, so you got to keep up with brother Zoo Gitchy. But 221 a day, and peace and blessings to Teti Ursama Ra Sanefaru. And Octo Thorpe is in the building, as well as Ross Tweed. Thank you both for joining. So we are live on Facebook and YouTube today. So we're not live on what is it, Twitter. So, but if you're on asarimhotep.com, excuse me, the Asarimhotep webpage, it is your comments will show up in my chat. But if you're on the Harold Johnson page, then they don't necessarily show up, and I don't know what the reason is for that. But without further ado, we are going to move forward with our discussion. And so what I'm going to do is share my screen. So we'll do that. We'll do the entire screen. So, and I think I'm gonna go full screen again so y'all can read the the text. So let me make sure that everything is kosher on this end here, and we should be straight. And so again, the question that we're asking today is, does Kemet mean black cattle? And for those who have been keeping up with the discussion over the years, you know that there are some in the community who believes that the word Kemet derives from a word Kim, meaning black, and Kemet being the name for Egypt, ancient Egypt, or at least one of the many names for ancient Egypt. And so, with that being said, another researcher makes the argument that the word Kemet ultimately derives from the word Kim, meaning black, but through the medium of black cattle, because there are some words, Kim and Kimiyet, meaning bull or black cattle, right? And so at least that is what is being argued, or at least depicted in the modern dictionaries. And so, on this channel, we don't believe anything. Demonstration beats conversation each and every time. And so this will be, again, another linguistic. And so we will be using the tool of historical comparative linguistics so that we can reach back into time and to ascertain the origin of the terms that we are discussing, and then to see how that was applied in the synchronic form as evidenced in the Egyptian hieroglyphic script and language. So we're going to continue here. So what I'm about to share with you today is discussed in my upcoming text, Race and Identity in Ancient Egypt, Volume 1, Towards a Meaning for the Place Name Kemet. And it is currently on pre-sale right now, which you can purchase your pre-sale copy at asarimhotep.com. And so you can get it at a discounted price, until the release date, which is going to be on August the 22nd of this year. So we have about a month and a half for the text to come, that the text will be released. So I would encourage you to get your pre-sale copy, to purchase via pre-sale, and so you can get it at a discounted price, and to let you know that if you do pre-sale, when you purchase the text, you will get one of the appendices. uh, I think it's the last appendix that of the text, so that you can read it, and it will hold you off until the release of the actual text. So again, it's going to be at asarimhotep.com, and I want to thank each and every one of you who have already purchased your pre-sale copy. And so we will continue. So for those of you who are not familiar with the word Kemet, uh, it is typically written in this fashion. So the green hieroglyph that you see here is what we call a biconsonantal glyph. And, bi meaning two, and that means it represents two consonants in sequence. And so in this instance, it represents the K sound and the M sound in sequence. So this one glyph represents consonants in sequence. The Egyptian language, as we understand it, did not write out the vowels. So we're not 100% sure, especially in the Old Kingdom and the Middle Kingdom, what the vowels were. But we do know the consonants. And so in this instance, the consonant sequence is KM. And this is a biconsonantal consonant, also known as a biliteral. And so the next glyph that you see here is an owl glyph, and it is a monoliteral or monoconsonantal glyph. And so it only represents one consonant sound, and that is an M sound. So normally it is argued that this particular glyph, in the context of the word Kemet, is what we call uh, a complement to the biconsonantal glyph here, right, or the biliteral. So it's a phonetic complement, and just to ensure that the reader understands that um, this glyph uh, is representing the KM, and that the second consonant in the sequence is indeed M. So we don't read it Kamemet, we just read it Kemet, and understand this glyph to be a phonetic complement. And so this so-called bread loaf, or at least the shape of it, is representative of the monoconsonantal sound T. And we believe this to be a suffix in the word Kim. And then this glyph here is the newt. It is a classifier, aka a determinative, and it does not have a phonetic value within the context of this word here. It's just there to let you know that it is a place that exists along the Nile, within the territory of Egypt itself. And so they have a different glyph that they put at the end of place names to indicate that it is outside of the territory of ancient Egypt. So this is the word Kemet. So there again, there is a KM consonant sequence that means black, but there are also other KM consonant sequences that do not mean black. And so, a mistake that many Egyptologists and laypersons make is assuming that every single word, the KM consonant sequence, or utilizes this glyph here, the Gardner sign I6 glyph, automatically makes the root to mean black itself. And that's what the book that I have written here challenges, that assumption. And so again, demonstration beats conversation. And so we must always prove all things, right? So there are others who have suggested that the word Kemet have to deal with black cattle, right? And they're still projecting, this modern concept of race, and trying to weave the notion that the people were considered a sacred herd and a sacred black herd, and so now they're trying to link the word for cattle and the word for the place name Kemet together, and trying to link that on the hypothesis put forward by Cheikh Anta Diop, the Senegalese Egyptologist who passed away in 1986, and who made the claim that the word Kemet means black people instead of black land, as many Egyptologists assert. And so, when you look at a number of word or images of cattle, you'll see that they come in a variety of types. And so here's a depiction of the Apis bull, uh, linked to Osiris, and you can see Osiris on top of the Apis bull, and this particular bull is black and white, right? Here's another variation of the same bull, again, mostly black in this depiction, but with sections of white. And you can see the name of Osiris with Seer Hapit or Hop right here. And, this is what became Apis in Greek. And so that's why we say the Apis bull, but it's the Hapit bull, right? And so we see another depiction here, of a native ancient Egyptian who does not look nothing like Zahi Hawass, as you can see. Uh, Here, kind of guiding, various cattle. And so it looks like it's two cattle or two bulls or two cows here. But that's not the case. It's actually four. So there's another cow right next to it, depicted in a lighter color, which you can see here on the top. And then we have next to this red cow, this black bull or black cow that is standing right next to it, right? Um, and so I'm just giving you different, uh, you know, depictions of the cattle in ancient Egypt. And so this is just another one, so you can see in this particular image here that there are various looks like cows, and they depict a number of five kind of together, and so they made them different colors so that they can stand out. But these are the typical colors and the variations that you see regarding the cattle. And so, in this one is from the New Kingdom in the mural tomb of Neb Amun in the British Museum. And so we can see another native ancient Egyptian who looks nothing like Zahi Hawass. And I'm going to just keep throwing shots this whole entire conversation regarding Zahi Hawass, right? And some more cattle and some more native depictions of ancient Egyptians who look nothing like Zahi Hawass. Um, More shots thrown, right? Um, some more cattle. This one is spotted, more white with black spots. And this is a wooden carving in the late Dynasty 11. And more native ancient Egyptians who look nothing like Zahi Hawass. Uh, here is a depiction of some more cattle and cattle herders, specifically in which I argue that they are of the Afar people. And we can tell because in each one of these depictions, they are, again, very dark skinned individuals with white afros. And that is typical of the Afar people. Like you can see this brother Muhammad here, same color, and it's saying they put this particular type of fat or oil in their hair and it turns it white. And, this is part of the culture, right? And again, some more depictions of ancient Egyptians and cattle. So when you see there's like a variety of cattle and, different types. So here are some ancient Egyptian words that have the KM consonant sequence, like for example, the one at the top, Kimiwa, herd of cattle, and then we have Kemet, black cattle, divine herd, and then Kimi, black bull. And so these definitions are defined as such the way that you would find them in any typical dictionary. And but again, when you are an Africologist and you're dealing with information regarding African people in subjects that have been dominated by Europeans, you always have to question the methods and the assumptions and the conclusions that they arrive to based on those assumptions. And so again, when they see a word that has the KM consonant sequence, they automatically assume in the majority of the times that the word itself has to deal with black because there is a Kim word in the ancient Egyptian language that means black. But this is, an indication in many respects of the laziness of a number of these scholars. And so, for example, on the right hand side, you see a bas relief from the mortuary temple of Ramesses III of a series of cows, right? And in each one of these uh, images here of the cattle, and you can see that they're all different types of colors here, but they're all dark colors. But next to them are glyphs that are used to represent different colors, right? Even though this glyph here is just used generally for skins, this one here, Hedget, is normally used to write the word for white. Desher is, and this is this glyph here, is used normally to write the word for red or reddish brown. And then this glyph right here, the I6 glyph, is normally used to write the word Kim black. And so the assumption that many people make when they're searching on Google for images of ancient Egyptian cattle is that when they see this relief, they believe that this Kim here describes the physical color of the cow. But as we can see, and I'm not sure what kind of device y'all are on, but if you're on a computer and you have a larger screen, you may want to put it on full screen so that you can clearly see the color of this. This is more so of a reddish brown color, right? But it's not depicted as black. And the Desher is kind of reddish, but there are other parts on it that are actually darker than the red. And so, admittedly, the colors are fading here, but you can clearly see the paint that was used on each one of these images. And so, we on this image here, we can see that the cow was painted black, right? And it may have had some white spots, may have had a white spot if we argue that this isn't the result of fading where you see my mouse at, but it has the hieroglyph that is used to depict the or to articulate the word hedge for white, but the cow is not white. So here, the word for white, it does not show a white cow. And in here, the word for Kim black is next to a cow that is not black. And so something else must be going on. And this particular scene here is part of a ceremony called driving of the cattle. And these do not necessarily represent colors, but these are actually directions or cardinal directions. And so we'll have to have a full conversation of just this scene, um, just as a subject unto itself. But these are not indicative of actual colors of the cows here. So again, something else is going on. And so when we examine other languages and other words, or related words for the same phenomena in ancient Egypt, especially regarding to cattle, we come to see that these words are never associated with the color black. And so, here is a picture on the right hand side of a young Zulu boy. I don't know what kind of festival or just party or whatever is going on here. But, uh, the Amazulu are a part of a larger Bantu group that, they call Ngoni or Nguni, right? And there's another group called the Maseko Ngoni, which you see here. And this slide is from another conversation I was having for another thing. But I just wanted to point out that, in this concept of Nguni is the name of this cluster of Bantu speakers in Southern Africa, different languages, and Amazulu belongs in that group. But the Nguni, you can find that word itself in ancient Egypt as Ngon, meaning ox, as you can see here. And at the bottom, you will see this word here, Kemet, holy herd, right? So-called of black cattle that we mentioned earlier. And and I don't think I've seen the words for so-called Kimi or Kemet black bull with any of the black determinatives. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I just can't recall off the top of my head, um, variants with those determinatives or classifiers. But this word here, Kemet, so-called holy herd, would be cognate with the isiZulu in the isiZulu language with Izi and Como, cattle, and Nkomo, domestic bovine animal, for example, an ox or oxen, right? And so in as indicated in the isiZulu language, there's nothing about black cattle, right? Or domestic bovine cattle. And we're going to see this repeated throughout this discussion. And so, as I stated before, this is going to be very linguistically ground. So, if you have your kind of pens and paper, I want y'all to pull it out and to take notes. And so there's certain things that I'm going to want y'all to kind of jot down and keep in mind as we are moving along in this conversation, right? So if you've been following this channel, that when we're doing any kind of linguistic analysis, we always want to set up sound meaning correspondences. We have to show a pattern of consonants in sequence in one language corresponding to the same consonants in sequence in the second language. And then if you had a language with vowels, then you would examine those vowels in the same process as well. And so, but the consonants are the most stable in terms of phonetics, or in terms of phonemes in the language. And so we put the consonants in a higher rank than the vowels, but the vowels are very important because they can create that will change the consonants, as we'll see later on in the conversation. But so remember this axiom that I follow and have created, And that is, one example is an accident or is coincidence. Is an accident. And then two examples is coincidence, right? But three examples show a pattern. And so we always want to have a minimum of three to show a pattern. And then, if you can find 5 and 10 and 20 in that same vein, then of course your argument is a lot stronger. So we want to start off with the ancient Egyptian, which I call Chikam, and the Chiluba Bantu language, right? So we can see in the left column, let's go with the first row, that the word Kim, to put an end to, and the causative variant of it, Sukim, with the S causative prefix, to bring to an end, to finish out, to spend. And there's a word Kim meaning to complete. That corresponds to Chiluba Koma, conclude, finish. And there's a variant Jikoma, conclusion, right? Because when you conclude something, when you finish something, you've come to the end. And so let's go to the second one, second row. So we have the causative uh, form of Sakim Kim, destruction, annihilation. And then you have Sakim, ruin, destroy, violently end life of an enemy, right? And so in Chiluba, that corresponds to Kuma, to beat, to knock, and then also the sound of thunder. And then you have Mukuma, a strike, a hit, a blow, a sound, right? And then we have Kim, complain, accuse, lament, to groan, to moan. And in a demonic uh, form, it survives as Kimi, to cry out. And that corresponds to Mukimu, groan, sigh, moan in the Chiluba. So what we're establishing here is that the K in the first consonant position the K in the first consonant position of ancient Egyptian corresponds to the K in the first consonant position in Chiluba. The M as in Mary in the second consonant position in ancient Egyptian or Chikam corresponds to the second consonant position phoneme of M in this instance in Chiluba. So Kim, Kam, on. And then another lecture in the upcoming book, of course, I demonstrate that ancient Egyptian T, the suffix T corresponds to the Chi prefix in Chiluba. So that's why when we talk about Kemet, we say Chikam. So in the Kemet language or the Chikam language, these correspond. So now, I want y'all to write this down if y'all are writing down, or you got a separate, you have a separate, window open that you can type some notes in. So you're gonna put in your notes that Egyptian K-M equals Chiluba K-M. Right? So that's your first notes. Egyptian K-M equals Chiluba K-M. And so now we're going to spice it up a bit. So in the Egyptian language, I show that the KM also corresponds internally to Egyptian M.H. And what I'm arguing is that the dotted H in ancient Egyptian equals the K in Chiluba. And of course, we know that M in Egyptian corresponds to M in Chiluba, right? So notice, let's look at the second column first. So notice that I have highlighted in the red, the consonant sequence is KM, just like what we have here. So we're seeing in ancient, the Chiluba, the KM consonant sequence corresponds to the KM in ancient Egyptian. But when we do that same consonant sequence in Chiluba, it also corresponds to M.H, right? So the assumption is that the M and the dotted H, the sequence has been switched, right? So when we have mehi, to flee, we have kima, to run, meh, arm, hand, forearm, claw, paw. In Chiluba, jikomo, fist. But also that same word, we have a different variant in Chiluba, claw, leg, feet with claws, foot tracks, traces, foot of an animal, trace, imprint. Me associated with spinning, kuma, spinning, making thread, make fabrics, etc., right? And so, we can go on, but we're establishing, the sound correspondences here, right? So if we demonstrate here that the M dash dotted H corresponds to Chiluba K dash M, then we should be able to make a prediction that the KM sequence in Chiluba is also going to correspond with dotted HM, right? The reverse of this, which we show here. And so I'm not sure if y'all can see all of that, but so I just reduced it and made a few here so we can look here, right? So that same consonant sequence, and keep in mind that sometimes the M may be pronounced mb, like when you say comb, like to comb your hair, that mb. So in the dotted H sequence, a club, a weapon for beating the wash, corresponds to chiluba chicombo. Travel stick, a cane, a staff, a rod, a scepter. Chem, surprise. Kima, wonder, wonder at, admire. Chikimu, exclamation of surprise. Astonishment, admiration. Jikima, astonishment. Him, crush, to press. Kama, to squeeze, close, etc. Compress, to crush, to express. Ham, to tread. Jikama, to press, to tread, to walk on something. Ham, to strike. Sahem, to pound. Kuma, again, to beat, to knock, to thunder. Kumuna, hit, knock, drop with shock, remove the dust by beating, right? So we're seeing here that the dotted HM is a variant of the M dotted H, and they both equal Chiluba KM. So remember that Chiluba KM also equals Egyptian KM. And now we're seeing that Chiluba KM also equals dotted HM and M dotted H in ancient Egyptian. And so this should tell you something, because transitivity axiom in mathematics and in logic, if A implies B and B implies C, or you can say equals, then A equals C, or A implies C. So again, if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. They're equivalent. So if Kim equals Kim, and Kim also, and Kim and Chiluba equals ancient Egyptian Kim, and Kim and Chiluba also equals dotted HM and M dotted H in Egyptian, then Kim in Egyptian also equals Egyptian dotted HM or M dotted H. So we're showing here that these are variants of the same consonant sequence KM. So this lets us know that if we find forms in the KM sequence, we will also find it in the dotted HM or M dotted H sequence, which we would assume is a different dialect of the language, So if the forms in this dialect would inform us of the KM dialect in ancient Egyptian. So I'm hoping that I'm making this clear and that you're able to follow. But Chiluba also has a different correspondence set with ancient Egyptian KM. So we saw that Chiluba KM equals ancient Egyptian KM. But in this instance, we're showing that ancient Egyptian KM also equals Chiluba SL. Right? So write that down at the bottom, this equation at the bottom. Egyptian K dash M implies or equals Chiluba S dash L. So we can go through the list here. Kemet, dorsal fin. Chiluba, musalala, fin, flipper. Kim, service, duty, work. Sala, to do, to work, to serve. Kim, to pay, and then in a nominal form, payment. In Chiluba, Sela, to pay the dowry for a wife. In Sala, price. Kim, complete, put an end to. Chiluba, Sula, to be finished, completed, to be tired, to be exhausted. Right? So KMSL, that's the law, the sound law that we've just established here. Right? And more examples is given this. You can come back and pause that. But this is also in the book. So if you purchase the book, boom, you have it on paper. So keep these sounds in mind. Now, so this tells us that the K sound in the first consonant position will also correspond to the S sound in the first consonant position, as evidence as from the ancient Egyptian corresponding to the Chiluba. And so now we're going to test that theory inside of Egyptian itself. So you can see here that the KM also corresponds to Egyptian SM and SW, because W is just a variant of M in the language. So the M sound, the B as in boy sound, the P as in Paul sound, all three of these labials can turn into W. And, I've discussed this numerous times. And of course, I discuss it in the upcoming text and demonstrate it. But you can see a few examples here. So we have Kim, profit, to pay. And then we have Isu, payment. Isawa should be payment. So Kim, complain. And then we have Simi, to report, to complain, also a reporter. And I equate the word Kemet, Egypt, internally with semi, meaning pasture. But we won't be stressing on the Kemet, the place name today. And so we have this form here in Kemiu, herd of cattle. Kemet, so-called black cattle, divine herd, corresponds internally to Semir, wild bull, Semerit, wild cow. Then we have Kemet, a woman's disease. And then we have Sut, symptom of an affliction or a disease. Then we have Sakim Kim, destruction, annihilation. And then we have Samad or Samar, thrust, not push to shove. And then Semer, to slay. We have Kemet, grain or plant. And then Kemu, seeds or fruit of a Kim plant. And then we have Simu, plants, vegetables. Semayit, herbs and herbage. And then we have Sakim, to grow old, to be wise. And then we have Sim, the oldest. And then we don't have a variant in Kim for this example, Semer, windpipe, lung. But as expected, it would correspond to SL in Chiluba, which is this third column here. And so we have Chi Sulu, lung. Then we have Kemet, crown of lower Kemet. And then it corresponds to Chiluba and Sala, extreme summit crown. So as you can see, we have some other internal correspondences. So we would find not only correspondences in Egyptian for KM, also for dotted HM, for M dotted H, and internally as SM or ZM, as we'll see later. So this is all important, and I'm leading y'all somewhere because we're coming back to this word for cattle, right? So notice that the internal cognate semer wild bull, semeri wild cow is not defined as black bull, black cow. Why is the internal cognate for the same word not being defined as black cow or black bull? Because the word, this Kimu herd of cattle, this so-called black cattle divine herd, is not built from the same root as Kim black. Is a different word. And this is one of the ways in which you can prove it, right? Again, the transitivity axiom. If A equals B and B equals C, A then equals C, right? So now let's look at these forms here. So we've already said we have the SM, ZM. So we have this word zemer, wildlife. It would be cognate internally with the dotted HMT, meaning an animal. Semer, wild bull. It would also correspond to HMZ, meaning crocodile. And y'all are saying, well, how can that be? Because a crocodile is clearly different from a wild bull. And so I want y'all to hold that thought and hold that challenge, until later. But I'm going to show you that the word for crocodile is the same as the word for wild bull, because they all come back to this word here, meaning wildlife, just a wild animal. And so with this suffix here, this Z, this wild animal has been specific to mean a crocodile, right? But in this instance, it means a wild bull. But wild animal is the root. And we're going to prove that later on. So ziberit, wild cow, is cognate with dotted HMT, hermet, cow, right? So just as the dotted HM can be M dotted H, the ZM or SM can also be MSMZ, right? So let's look at this. So you see here, we've already dealt with these in the last slide, the ones on the top row. So now let's look at the one on the bottom row. Missy, kind of waterfowl. Chemet, an animal. Miss dotted H, crocodile. And you should know that the dotted H affix is and it can be prefixed as well as also used for all types of animals. So it's just a suffix for animals. So we have this MS for crocodiles, and then we have dotted HM dot Z for crocodile. So this is what I'm saying here. This is how we know that the wild bull and the crocodile are cognates. And we have this miss, meaning calf, a young cow, and then hemet, a grown, an adult cow, so to speak. And we see that same consonant sequence in the word for chisim, dog, and then sisimet, horse, which is a partial reduplication. And we see the reduplicated form, sim, meaning horse. And so when the Europeans, introduced and through via the Asians, so to speak, introduced the horse, they named it with the word for wildlife. So we can see that the same root for wildlife, for wild animal, became the word for horse, and the same root in the word for dog with the ch prefix. In other, words, you'll see this ch suffixed. This is an affix, is what we would say. So you're seeing all these different variations coming from the same root. And I'm going to show you how all this comes to be, right? So on my channel, on this very channel that y'all are watching on YouTube, I have a video of Dr. Mubabinge Bilolo, who you see here in the right. So this is a picture that I took. Excuse me, this is a screenshot of a video that I took of him when we invited him to come to the University of Houston in 2010. And so he's giving us a lecture on, how he came to use his native language, Chiluba, when doing comparisons with ancient Egyptian. So it is because of Dr. Bilolo that I've gotten into using Chiluba and been able to expand on hypotheses and arguments that he's made. And and it, and I say this because in this particular lecture, he discusses how it is very essentially unscientific and lazy for Egyptologists to always assume that any word with the consonant sequence KM is has a root Kim meaning black. And he's saying that, my native language, if you was to write the consonants KM in sequence, you would see that there are many different words, and none of them, these other words do have nothing to do with blackness. But this is something that that Egyptologists have just run with, and then of course many in our community, who aren't necessarily researchers, but because they don't understand how to make arguments and how to prove arguments, they just roll with what the Egyptologists say without any kind of vetting process, right? And so in this discussion, he makes the argument that the Kim glyph, and we're not talking about the word Kim in terms of the uh, the word meaning Kemet, the country. He's just talking about the hieroglyph itself. And he had made the argument that it was a crocodile leg or a crocodile foot, right? And so, there are some Egyptologists who, well, it was actually one Egyptologist who argued that the I6 Kim glyph was a pile of burning coal. Sheikh Anta Diop rolled with that because that's what they put in the Ehrman and Grappal Waterbush dictionary. But they got that from this one scholar. I forgot his name off the top, but there's no evidence whatsoever of that. Other scholars have suggested that it's an alligator tail, right, or a crocodile's tail, and there was another scholar who is independent of Dr. Bilolo also made the following argument. And this is what he introduced to us in that 2010 lecture when we brought him to the University of Houston. And that, again, that the glyph is, in fact, a alligator's foot, right? And so in his language, to describe this kind of foot, it's not necessarily that it is strictly an alligator's foot. There's a character of the foot of the type of, foot or arms that have these kind of claws on them, right? Like this, it's these extensions that come out and bend in the form of a claws. So it's a set of animals that have this feature, and so you can see this also. I believe this is an eagle or a type of eagle. You can see the what they would call a talon type feet and claws. That this is what he's referring to. So this jikama, when it comes to claw, leg, feet with claws, foot tracks, foot of an animal, print, imprint, and trace, it has all these different definitions. You would say jikama, G being a prefix, a modern Bantu prefix, but this is what it is. So you would say kama, jikama, right? And so when he made this proposal, I have echoed it, but I still kept it open that, this may not necessarily be correct, right? Because as even as even Bilolo has stated in this very lecture, Brother Asar don't believe nobody, right? He always goes behind the scholars and 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 makes his own arguments. And so this is something that Bilolo has actually said. So if you go on my channel and you find Dr. Bilolo lecture from 2010, and you can speak or listen and understand French. This is our interpreter right here. He's given the lecture in French. So that's one thing that he says. So some years later, I was able to prove that he was correct in a way. It's not as direct as he argued, but Bilolo was on the right track. And so one way that we can prove this is by understanding a uh, a rare form of the word kim. So there's a rare form of the word kim, meaning to rise, to get up, to stand up, and to mount, to go up, to climb, right? And it is cognate with two forms in Chiluba. So in Chiluba, you would have kola, to grow, to swell, and to grow old. And then you have this other form with the causative. See, the causative prefix in Egyptian is I should say, is prefix in Egyptian, but the causative s in Chiluba is suffix. So they say kalesha, to increase, to augment, to strengthen, and to fortify as a secondary meaning, right? And of course, it corresponds to Sikkim, to grow old, to be wise, right? So notice how this root here, kola, and I show in the text that not only does KM correspond to, in Egyptian, correspond to KM in Chiluba, but it also corresponds to KL in Chiluba, as we can see here. But remember, we already did the work earlier and shown that Chiluba SL also corresponds to Egyptian KM. So sometime in the proto language, there was a split where the K sound became S in both ancient Egyptian and in Chiluba Bantu. So we have these different forms. So we have the KL form in Chiluba, but we also have the SL form in Chiluba. So we have Sela, to swell due to humidity. Selwisha, another causative form, to swell, to make larger, to amplify. Musela, musele, bud, a pimple, a malt, a sprouted corn, seed for making beer. Kusela, to swell up, to increase in size, to expand. In the Doluo language, a so-called Nilotic language um, that is spoken in Kenya, sori, insori, a bulge, a protrusion, a cape. And notice that in Chicam, it also has an SR or SL consonant sequence. So we write it as SR, to spread, to extend, to stretch. And then in nominal form, seret, a thorn or a spine. And so this is going to be very important, because remember this notion here that it is a projectile that comes out of the feet that curves and comes to a point. That's the characteristic of jikama, right? And so you can see that feature on the crocodile. Now, this is a photo, or part of a photo of a papyrus that I took a picture of in Egypt last year. And so it's the papyrus of Uyas in the Cairo Museum. And so to say crocodile, you can say Hermes crocodile or Mesech crocodile. These are both the same word. These are from different dialects or languages that existed in the territory of ancient Kemet. But you can see the projectiles coming off of the back and the tail. So remember that there's a word kemet meaning dorsal fin, and that in one instance is applied to the god Sebek, that is a crocodile god. And you can see the projectiles coming off of the back, as well as, of course, we know the kind of claws that a crocodile or a alligator. I don't know if this is an alligator or a crocodile, but they're one and the same, but of course different in terms of the snouts, right? So this is a feature that you see here. And so remember, I just mentioned Kemet dorsal fin. So when you're looking at a dorsal fin, it has that feature. So it has these projectiles coming out of the base, and they come out and curve. And so that's what you look at when you see a fin or a dorsal. And so, of course, in Chiluba, Mu, Salala, fin, and flipper. And in Kikongo, you would say Kisala, tail fin, which would be here, right? So any kind of fin, flipper, dorsal fin, it's the same, right? So these are the cognates that you find in Bantu for this particular feature. So just like how you see this feature coming out the fish, you see that same kind of feature coming out of the crocodile. And so I'm helping y'all to say, I'm helping y'all here. I'm building this up here. So now as if you have my Ujima volume 2, you know that I argue that the word for black in terms of Kim derives from a word that Kim meaning hair. And the word Kim meaning hair, it went through an evolutionary process, and so it's pronounced differently in the language by the first dynasty. But in Chiluba, you would say Masalala, meaning mane, hair. And then this variant, M.H, WT, mane of a baboon. So this is why you establishing the sound meaning correspondences and the sound laws are important in the process, because you will discover different forms of the word in the same language, right? And so for the connection here, what makes mane stand out is that this is the kind of hair that kind of projects out and curves like this, just like on a lion, just like on a monkey, right? This is a baboon here, the mane of a monkey. So mechewit, and this is chemet, mane of a baboon, and musalala, mane, right? And then we have this other rare form of the word kim, but it is kimu, which is a chestnut. And a chestnut is also known as a night eye. It is a calyceus, protruding body of a horse, which can be found on the inside of the knee on the foreleg. The chestnut varies in size and grows over time, protruding from the leg surface. So if you understand that this what becomes chestnut here is this word kim, to rise, to get up, to stand up, to mount, to go up, to climb. That's why when we see this variant in Doluo, sori, imsori, a bulge, a protrusion, a cape, right? And it manifests itself in this rare word, meaning kimu, meaning a chestnut. And so this is a picture of a chestnut on a horse. It's a protrusion of a callus, like when you're talking about like a calcified, it's just a hardened, protruding projectile out of the legs, right? And so that same root in Chiluba becomes a word for a branch, right? So chisala, branch with its leaves, a twig, a flower. In Kikongo, you would say masala, peanut leaves. And so if you notice anything about a branch from a tree, it projects out and it curves to a point, right? And so in some other forms, chisala, leafy branch, green bowl, and jisala, meaning feather. And then we have in Middle Egyptian, mehet, feather, because the same word for hair in African languages is the same word for feather. They didn't see a difference. So that's why mahout, mane of a baboon, is the same word as bechet, feather. Just like how we see it in Chiluba. So musalala, mane, hair, is the same as jisala, feather. So I hope it's starting to click. And so this is the power of historical comparative linguistics that allows us to go back to the beginning and to see how words evolved over time. And so there you may see analyze a particular term, and you'll hear a linguist say that this word and this other word here are cognates, but they don't they don't seem to have the same meanings. How can they be cognate? Because words have derivative meanings, and they evolve from words that give the secondary meaning in one lane, uh, and then in another path it gives this other type of secondary meaning. So in this instance, for example, in Chiluba, salala, it means to spread, to disperse, to spread out of a termite nest. And then we have the other form, sanana, spread and expand, and L turns into N here. Then we have kusela, to swell up, to increase in size, to expand. So when you're talking about spreading or expanding, these are all the same. They're all within the same semantic field. And I try to find a good image that kind of display that, right? And keep in mind that this root, I'm giving y'all a heads up here. This root is what gives rise to the word Kemet, meaning the land. But that's a different discussion we're gonna have for a different day, right? So when you seeing cows and cattle and all of those different animals, they have the same feature. It is they all have these projectiles that extend out of their bodies, whether they're horns, whether they're claws on their feet, or whether they're dorsals on the back of their backs, basically, right? These are all the same features. So these animals that have these characteristics, they're in Chiluba, we call them Makama. And so when you talk about these types of animals, you would say in Chiluba, Inyama ya Makama, animals of Makama. And remember, Jikama is the word talking about claws, legs. In other words, these projectiles. So when you think about a giraffe, of course, on one level is long neck that projects out, but they're really talking about the kind of horns that stick up on the top of the head of the giraffe. When it comes to an elephant, it's the tusk, right? When it comes to a zebra, it's the mane that's on the back of the neck. When it comes to a rhino, and of course, it is its tusk, it is its horn, right? When you talk about deer or anything along in that range, or you talk about a goat, they all have these horns here. So there's no difference between, in terms of the word, between a goat, a rhinoceros, an elephant, a crocodile, any of these things, and they're all in Yama Yamakama, animals of the Makama, right? And so, as I state in the book, and this is directly from the book, this would explain all the reflexes in Chikam of Kim. For example, Kim bull, Kemet cow, Kimiyet cattle, Merieti, reference to crocodiles, Ber ram, Zimmer wildlife, Simer wild bull, Simerit wild cow, Siwu crocodile, Sakitiu kind of cattle, Hemazet crocodile, Shin crocodile, Sumerian sheg, a deer or a mountain goat, Sig, a designation of cows, Mosh, goat, ecstasy, sacrificial animal for omens. Reflexes in Yoruba support our hypothesis. For example, Ida, creature, ede, buffalo, edu, a kind of wild goat, idi, eagle, right? And I make a note, see Appendix E, Table 1 for Egyptian KM correspondences. And I note that a buffalo or a goat has horns extending from the head. For example, in collagen, in an Anandi language, you would say sir, cow's horns, which curve out, but then inwards at the tips. Suer, sticking out, usually of cow's horns, metaphorically of teeth, right? So all of these different variations that you see here that I have highlighted in red and bolded, I have already done the work and they're in the text, and I prove that these are all cognates and they correspond to Kim, right? So now we can see and why the understanding of sound change and the addition of prefixes and suffixes, the knowledge of the syllable inverses, because myrrh is also a cow in ancient Egyptian. And so not to have y'all, wait to get the book to see, for example, the correspondence, but look, in Yoruba, for example, when you have dudu, you say that means black and dark. Adu, one who is very black, jet black, corresponds to Kim, black, dark. Kimim, to be black, dark, which also corresponds to Zemiri, darkness. Ida, payment of taxes. Idana, dowry. Kim, to pay, to total up, credit, profit, duty. Dide, to rise. Kim, arise, to mount, which corresponds to Inger, ger. This is a variation, and we show this as well, the N being a verbal prefix, to rise. Ade, crown. Kim, crown of Lower Egypt. Mehu, crown of Lower Egypt. And so, of course, if you don't recognize any of the sound changes, all of that was done in the upcoming text. So, ado, small gourd. Ide, a jar. Kemet, a vessel, a jar, a pot. Sinu, a vessel. And then, of course, here we go. Eda, creature. Ede, buffalo. Edu, a kind of wild goat. Idi, eagle, right? Kimi, black bull. Kimi, black cow, so-called black Kimiet cattle. Zemir, wildlife. So wildlife is the equivalent. This is the overarching term. And then with any kind of different kind of prefixes and suffixes, it becomes specific, a type of wildlife. So when you talk about a goat or a rhino or an alligator or a crocodile or something like that, that's a different type of wildlife. But it's all that's the meaning. That's where the word Kim, bull, and cow and cattle come from, not from black, right? And we can prove this because when we go into the other languages, there's no word for black cattle. You would have to find a different word black in the language to define the type of cattle. You would have to say two different words, black and then cattle, or black and then bull. And so in the Cushitic language, in the Bilin language, Kim, Khmer, Kim, all these words mean bull or cattle. And then in the Dangla and East Chadic, Kuma, meaning meat. This is a secondary meaning. Kome, meat. Socorro, Kam, Arco, buffalo. Central Chadic, Bura, Kum. Kilba, Kum. Marji, Kum. Wamdiu, Kumu, meat. Muduma, Kumu, calf. Because there's a secondary meaning. So it's wildlife, bull, cattle, and then meat, the word for meat. In Western Chadic, Bolewa, Quim, cow. Kari Kari, Quam, cow. Ngamo, Kum, cow. Pochi, Kum, bush cow. Zul, Kume, bush cow. Ingazim, Quam, bull. Bade, Quam, bull. In isiZulu, as we introduced earlier, Izi and Como, cattle. Inkomo, domestic bovine. Ox, oxen. Bantu in general. Kikongo and Gombe, cow. Bovine and Chiluba and Gombe. Cow, ox, cattle. Mande is Gama. And also the G turns into D and you say Jama or Dama, meaning ox. None of these words mean cow. It's just cow, bull, ox. And then the secondary meaning, or it should really be a tertiary meaning meat, right? So when we look at these terms here, herd of cattle, black bull, it has nothing to do with black at all. It's just a word for bull. It's just a general word for cattle. This is why when you see in this Ramesses III tomb entry here, that where the word Kim is, it is not a black cow at all, right? And so these are the different variations as proven through regular sound meaning correspondences of the word for bull or cow in the Egyptian language. And I go through the process and to show how, just like in the example where the M dotted H and the H dotted M, which becomes W here, who, class of bulls, cattle in general, that there is also a sequence where that S and Z is switched on to the second side. So it becomes MS or MZ, and the Z becomes rotarized and becomes So that's how you get mer, bull, merit. Now, this one is defined as black cow. And then Miri, fighting bull. But bull is not defined as black bull. Right? And this is just the feminine of, here we go. This is just the feminine of this. So they never define Mer as a black bull, or Miri as a fighting black bull, because they don't have a Mer in the Egyptian language meaning black. So this is why we go through this entire process to get to the roots, because any scientist knows that looks can be deceiving. And this is why we don't do lookership, right? You just don't go with your first mind when you're doing academic and scientific work. You always go through the thorough process of proving your points. So when we see this type of cattle, right, understand that this is an animal that belongs to Makama, right? Because it has those particular types of features. And lastly, remember that this mer, bull, merit, black cow, Marie, fighting bull, right? There's also an inverse of that. And so I want to show, like in Wolof, and this is from a conversation that that I had on Facebook, and brother Zugichi chimed in with some words that we have here in the middle column, and then I came back and shown him that what's in Wolof is R, in terms of the consonant sequence, RW or RB corresponds also to RW in ancient Egyptian. And so that's what these correspondences show here. And I want to just show this right here. So this word Ru, meaning lion, and then there's a variant here, Ruinuit, meaning heifer, a cow, that it corresponds to Wolof Rab, meaning wild animal, spirit, and devil. So we can see here that even Wolof confirms that it's the concept of a wild animal. So this Simir bull here, and where do we go? Here we go. The Zimmer here we go. Yeah, it's at the bottom. Zimmer wildlife. It shows up. So the Wolof language is closer to this form in Chicam, what I call Chicam B for the moment, Zimmer wildlife. And so that would be Rab. So the Z became R in the process in linguistics we call rotarization. And the M and B interchange even in Egyptian. And I believe so even in Wolof, right? So Ra, wild animal, spirit, devil. These are probably just what do we call it? A homonym, probably a separate word here, right? And so notice that at the bottom of the page, I have this hieroglyph here. And this hieroglyph is of a lion sitting down. And the consonant sequence is RW. So that's where you get this word rawa, ra, meaning lion, right? Notice that this sign also is used to write foreign words that have an L sound, because to our knowledge, the ancient Egyptian did not have an L sound. So when they would write foreign words and they wanted to write the L, as in lance or look or a lack, something like that, they would use this glyph. But when it comes to Egyptian words, it was a two consonant glyph. So it was R plus W. But notice it also is in B. So you can say Ru, and you can also say Neb. And Neb would be closer to the form that you see here, Neb, Ra. And so because R and N interchange in Egyptian. So we can see that these are two different dialect or language forms of the same word. And that is important because, as you can see here, notice I have Ru at departure, Ruru to leave, Ruri to expel, to drive off, Ra, pass, escape from, be saved, and Wolof. But I also have NW, because remember, B's, M's, and P's all become W through particular sound change in ancient Egyptian. So an R and N interchange, as we can see here. And so this word nu, meaning to hunt, is reb, to hunt, and Wolof. Newt, thread, yarn, for weaving, cord, nuher, rope. In verbal form in Wolof is rab, to weave, to knit, to make baskets. Nu, to clothe, to wrap. Robe, to don, that means to clothe. Now it is believed that it comes from French, robe meaning dress, robe meaning dress. But we have to consider new to clothe because we've already set up the sound correspondences. So this may be an indigenous word and not based on French. And then we know the nasalized volar trill, sometimes it manifests itself as an N, and other times it will manifest itself as an R. But notice here, remi, to mix. But there's another form, rebikhe, to mix, to join, to be merged with. You can see the interchange of B and M. And both of these can become W. And what we look at in the Wolof, it is rimba, to mix, to batter porridge, right? So it could be that the reason why M and B correspond in a lot of words is because in an earlier form of the word, it was MB that split. One word became rim, another one became rib, as we see in ancient Egyptian. So even when we go into Wolof, we can see the correspondence here. Iran, meat, because remember, cattle also mean meat, flesh, beast, animal. Wolof, rab, wild animal. Iran, sewing, seam. Ran, to twist cord or line, to twist. Rab, to weave, to knit, to make baskets. Ren, to move, walk, go, progress, sell. Romba, to pass. Iran, apparition, and that means a spirit or a ghost. So this is how we know that word for Rab, meaning wild animal, is a separate word. It's a homonym for Rab, spirit, devil, right? But notice in both forms here, there's an A in between. So Iran, apparition, spirit, ghost. Rab, spirit, devil. Iran, meat, flesh, beast, animal. Rab, wild animal. So this corresponds on many levels, right? Only in, and I don't know why I have Chicam here. I do apologize. That should be Yoruba, and this is the Yoruba language, right? So this is my mistake. I need to correct that. This is Yoruba. So the only difference between these two is a prefix, which the Wolof language lost. But as you can see in Chicam, we have RNN, just like what we see in Chicam, a kind of cattle. So this would fall in line with Iran, meat, flesh, beats, animal, and Wolof, Rab, wild animal. So as you can see, these terms here, further confirms that when you can't always just randomly and haphazardly apply the word uh, Kim, black, to forms of words without any kind of due diligence. And so hopefully y'all have kind of understood that, and we will leave kind of on that note, but I'll open it up for some questions. And so while y'all are gathering your questions, I'm going to need each and every one of you to That's right. Make sure that you hit the like button. And if you are new to this channel, please consider subscribing like this all of the time. And so when I came back, I saw that there were 82 new comments on here. So I'm not going to be able to go through and view all of them. So I'm only going to look at the bottom here and see what y'all got going on. And let me see. I'm just going to go up to, let's see, transitivity. Yeah. Zoo 21. King, bones of the fingers, really claws, emphasis being on extremities. See, now I got to add that to the conversation. But there's also the king meaning. Is this the same one meaning dorsal fin as well? Let me know, brother Zugichi. Again, for those who don't know, he's a native Wolof speaker. And we have Jean Cedric Ngua. He says, according to Giambari and Bach, Kim is associated with the back of the crocodile. It can, but there's a deeper, and this is why the linguistics is essential, because it's not necessarily the back of the crocodile itself. It's anything that has a base and that has projectiles coming out of it and curving. And so what I argue in the text is that the I6 glyph is really a heel with plants coming out of it. And it has to deal with the kind of also the edge of the shore, right? And then there's other evidence for that, but that's a different conversation. But this is why we just don't go kind of on the looker. We got to go into the language and use the comparative method, and it will help reveal for us what is needed. And he says, and in many Bantu classifying languages, the words of the back are related to the word of darkness or of obscurity or blackness. We also got to keep in mind that there are homonyms in the language, and you got to be able to distinguish between a homonym and to go back into time and to see if the word for in this instance, for example, the word for back and the word for darkness and obscurity, there's no connection between the two, right? But it's the same even with the word Kemet, right? Like there's a word Kim that means black, and then there's a word Kim that means cattle. Now, on a different level, at the base level, there's a common origin, but they're from two different uh, semantic past. So you have the one origin of, to expand, to swell, to grow, to rise. And in one semantic trajectory, it becomes the word for to grow in hair. And then from hair to black. Then you have in another projection the word for to grow, to expand, to swell. And then it becomes the word for foot claws, anything that deal with claws and horns and projectiles and the dorsal fin. And then that becomes the word for cattle. But those two aren't connected. The word for Kim, black, and the word for cattle, they're not connected at that level. Only on the level of the verb, meaning to grow and to expand. And so this is what allows for us to get to the bottom of things, and to know when there's a homonym in the language versus a true, like, this is derived from this. So it'd be different if there wasn't these two paths, and then because there was black, then there was a word for black bull and black cow. Then they would be connected in that line, but they're not connected at all, after this level. And this is for, words in the entire lexicon, because all of the words that we speak come from a small, narrow group of roots, right? And so words may ultimately 20, 30,000 years ago, come from these 5 or 10 words. But by the time we get here, 5,000, 10,000 years ago, they're totally on a different level and a different plane. And so that's why we have to go through this process to distinguish what are the particular paths from which words have evolved over the year. What are the morphemes that are going to be used as well to make these types of distinctions, right? Rich the African Elder, Hotep, hey family at work, so we'll be popping in and out, and I'm gonna see you in the archives. Peace, thank you. And Asarim Ka, peace and blessings to you. Says myrrh is love. Myrrh, there's one word that means love. There's several different myrrhs that have nothing to do with love at all. And this is what we mean. The lay person just sees words that have the same consonant sequence and believe that these are all connected in some kind of way. That's just not how it's done. Kimmy is black in Meta Nature, and Compton and Greek uses it occasionally. No, they do not. Discuss that in the text. And Zugishi says, Maro, be one accord, be on good terms. And is it possible to measure temporal proximity between different African languages without a lot of inscriptions? Many linguists have tried to attempt to measure the time depths of the departure or the splitting of certain languages, but there really is no way to date languages, because languages they're not material, right? They're thoughts, ideas in people's heads that we symbolize through speech, that once it goes out into the ether, it disappears. It doesn't exist anymore. And you aren't born with your language. You have to learn your language when you are young, because adults are speaking and you're imitating their speech patterns. And then over time, you start to make connections between, okay, this word is referencing this deal, this idea, and as you grow and mature. But there's no DNA sequence that captures words and ideas and language, and then it just activates in your body, and then you're speaking the language. And so the only way that you're able to date a language is if there is enough writing at a particular point in time, and then you're able, and then the same people speaking the same language exist in the same area, and then over time you have been able to chronicle how the language was spoken in these intervals, and then you can see the rate of change in terms of sound, and then morphology, borrowings, and the like. You can measure the retention and of concepts and ideas and words from the earliest attestation in the written form to what we have in the modern form. And unfortunately, for 99% of languages in the world, we don't have that kind of knowledge. And so they try to use some kind of statistical, but it's not based in fact, it's not based in reality. And so nobody really uses them, but you cannot date languages. Languages don't exist as material things. You can't carbon date a language, right? And so it's a mental thing, and it only exists in the minds of human beings. And unfortunately, they don't pass on language to genetically to their own. And learn together with a bomb says we see it M, and then B in Bantu languages a lot. Indeed. He said riparians for the oh Lord. Zoo, I agree that Rob is likely an indigenous term, new Ru less so. But I see how it may explain some things. All right. And you said it's different, but the same root. Exactly. And peace and blessings to Living in Truth, Prophetess Keys Truth. Thank you for joining the conversation. And it says, by isolating historical items or well-documented changes through groups, the thing. Negist, if I'm saying that wrong, does the word Kim, meaning rise, have anything cosmologically to do with Asar's resurrection? I don't know. I haven't explored that in the text, and that would be a good research question. Although I associate the Kim blackness with Asar and all of the other deities and whatnot with having to deal with death. And I have a whole chapter. It's an appendix. It's one of the appendixes in the back of the book that explores that, and we're able to explain. But even with Asar, that is one of the many reasons, because his blackness is also associated with water, as you'll discover in the text, right? And so there's a lot to cover in the text, and that's why it's over, it's close to 500 pages, the book. And you're welcome. It says this may explain why I'm seeing a lot of old Kayan roots in Willoff plant life. Exactly. Because it has to deal with growth. And remember, there's KM in the Egyptian that has to deal with plants and seeds. And let me see. Yeah, and you're welcome. And I don't see anything else. And so I'm just going to have to catch the archive to see what y'all wrote in the chat from there. But since I am not seeing any more questions, I won't hold y'all up anymore on this fantabulous Monday. But make sure that you go to asarimhotep.com and you pre-order your copy, Race and Identity in Ancient Egypt, Volume 1. And there's more information that I have on the subject in which we're discussing today, which make the video too long. So, of course, we didn't cover it, but it has covered some additional evidence in a text that shows you that even certain scholars have recognized that the Kimi and Kimiyet, meaning so-called black cattle, can refer to other cattle that has nothing to do with blackness, right? That are not black. So this is even acknowledged by a few other scholars, in which I cite in the text. So, so just make sure that you go to well, I got my email address up there. That's what I need to know. That's not it. So there we go. asarimhotep.com. When you go there, then you can purchase the text. And then, of course, you get a sample copy, a sample chapter one of the appendixes. I believe it's Appendix E. And so, that's the chapter dealing with how the word Kemet is cognate with the Hebrew words that give you the Garden of Eden, right? The Garden of Eden. And so, that's a very powerful chapter, but it'll make a lot more sense once you, read especially chapter 3 of this particular text here, Race and Identity in Ancient Egypt, volume 1. So with that said, I appreciate each and every one of you. And until next time, peace.